Good afternoon and welcome to ARPAS-UK's webinar with the ECITB and Reg and Elliott Corke of Global Drone Training. We're delighted to be able to welcome them here today, and we are going to be discussing, or they are going to be discussing and presenting to us on the topic of improving and certifying remote pilot skills for drone operations in the engineering construction industry and beyond. As we see drones developing in the UK market, it is vital that these standards are developed and increased for the industry. And we are very pleased that we have got two such excellent people to come and present to us today. Elliott, as some people know, has been operating drones for a number of years and is also an RAE. Been operating since 2012, so really very early doors. And Reg is the product development manager working for the ECITB, the Engineering Construction Industry Training Board. Just to be clear on that, acronyms are everywhere in all these industries. We are delighted that they're here. I'm going to hand over to them now because they are going to take us through this subject.
Okay, thanks very much, Eleanor, and thanks for having us. Good to see a few familiar names there. I can't see you, but so I'm going to basically be talking at Reg for the next little while because I can see him. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Eleanor. Just very quickly to introduce myself. I'm an environmental scientist by background. I spent 10 years as a secondary science school teacher, so I've always found that nothing in the drone industry is ever as dangerous as lots of year nines with Bunsen burners. I started HexCam in 2011, been operating since 2012, number 117 on the old numbering system. There's us back in the day. And I started training people in around 2013. One of our original trainees, Adam, I see is in the audience. And but HexCam has developed a sort of survey and inspection specialism over time. And we are now offered training in both the UK and Africa. And we've got a very broad range of instructors who've got different backgrounds from both conventional aviation and drone aviation. And also back in the day was one of the ARPAS-UK founding members as well. And we've been working for a really sort of interesting decade of drone operations, moving from the original permission for aerial work through to the PIFCO, through to operational authorizations, and then wherever that's going to be going next with the current consultations going on. We've been working within a constantly changing regulatory landscape, particularly since Brexit. We've had a changing social landscape post-COVID, particularly. Again, with the way things have been going at Westminster, we've got constantly changing political landscape, and we're dealing with a constantly changing technological landscape as well. So it's been a very, very interesting sector to be involved with, and as a result, we've had to just constantly adapt as a business. In terms of our training perspective, we've always, I personally have always found the kind of the focus in terms of the training elements has always been incredibly theoretical. I mean, we've run the GVC and the precursors to the GVC, and there's always been a very heavy theory focus. Practical assessments have always been pretty basic. Those of us who've been through the GVC or the earlier processes know that most of the focus is on the theory, and the practical assessment, has always been in a very benign location out in the field somewhere, probably. And with basic maneuvers, and I've always seen that kind of GVC test really just as a basic test, and the closest analogy I've always found to it is the kind of CBT for motorbikes. It is literally, is this person safe to be let loose on the general public? As a company, we've always put a big emphasis on the practical side of training. So we actually started off doing practical training before we did any of the rest of it. And now drones, yes, they're easier to fly, but there's more complex things going on with the drones in more complex environments than maybe early in the industry. And as a result, when we were invited to join the ECITB working group on drone training standards, we were very, very happy to be invited, because once we started getting into that working group and I saw the focus, the focus was much more on the practical side of things. as well as you know, working in complex environments. I kind of thought that was something we really wanted to get our teeth into. So what I'm going to do is we're going to be talking about the two courses of, well, the main course that's been developed so far and the advanced skills tests that have been developed as part of the Future Flight project, and a little bit about where, you know, where the direction that ECITB is going in the training. But what I'm going to do for the moment is hand over to Reg to just to give you an introduction to the ECITB and where, you know, where they feel this need has come from. Okay. So Reg, I'll click on demand.
Please move on. Hello there. My name's Reg Wood. As said by Ellen, I work for the ECITB and I'm a product development manager. And I was fortunate enough to be given the drones project, which we'll talk about very shortly. So I want to just explain who ECITB is and why we're here. So ECITB represents a lot of the major infrastructure that's in the UK. We're part of the DFE, but we're funded by an actual act of parliament. So we not only are we funded, but we tend to give that money back. It's not an intention that, you know, it like goes into a pot. The employers pay into a pot, a levy fund, and then they draw that down, and we develop products that they want basically, and that's to help serve their market. So we represent an awful lot of sectors. So we've got the nuclear, the oil and gas. Elliott, do you want to just put their little logos up? The oil and gas, power generation, food and drink, renewables, water, and that's where we tend to get our requests for training from. So that's where we tend to get our requests for training from, and that's we reflect how our companies or clients feel about training and competence, and drones is one of the areas where they've got very strong views. Next slide, please. So our main focus with this is to ensure that they've got the competent workforce that they need really to do, and as many people have done through the development of drones, have realized that drones offer great potential. So the ECITB is helping our employers to use drones to obviously save costs, drive productivity, and to ensure that they've got a coverage of good pilots for the network across the entire country. Next one, please. So are you going to talk about, oh, so it's me really, sorry, I thought it had moved on to you. Apologies there. So we developed an initial standard back in 2017. The standard didn't really get used. If you want to just carry on, Elliott, please. And there were several reasons for that. One of them, it was difficult to assess. We set the criteria far too rigid, the requirements to actually assess that most drone companies didn't really have. Next one, please. One of the things we learned when we went through the redevelopment after 2017 was that the training providers were not large companies. Most of the companies we generally deal with are thousands of employees, and yet a lot of drone companies were very small, 2 or 3, maybe even single employees, not going much more than very micro SMEs. Next slide, please. And we soon found ourselves in a position where we're very rarely, we've got quite a few courses and qualifications and things that we offer, but they're generally for well-known established trades like welding, pipe fitting, design and drafting, project controls and things like that. So the drone was quite something different. And therefore that lent us to, we had limited knowledge in the ECITB. And therefore we needed to work extensively with the industry to be able to get this correct for our employers. We've got a lovely picture there of a drone flying actually out on a site, doing what we want it to do, which is help survey and maintain that site. So fast forward to 2021, and a few things had changed. One of the reasons I mentioned above about the size of the training provider meant that people didn't have the ability to develop what we would class a training syllabus or a training standard, which is a syllabus into course materials. So they didn't have that. They were too busy earning the wages and paying the mortgages and so on. So we decided we would have to develop the course in its entirety. And then the technology from 2017 to 2021 was becoming much more widely used. And we have got some shining stars in our clients who actually use it significantly. And we're blazing a trail in the use, whereas other sectors of our industry were lagging well behind. So some sites have got their own pilots. Other sites haven't even adopted a drone at all, or even let drones on site. So, and then our levy payers started asking, because most of them in the senior positions had not really come across drones at all. And they didn't even know how to ask the question of the service provider, as in, what can you do? Can you do this? Can you get us images of that? How far, how close can you get? What kind of drone are you going to bring? They didn't even have the basic questions. They didn't know what to ask to do due diligence, and due diligence is a major issue for industry. So we set up a working group. And so we in the initial working group, what we did was we soon discovered that there was no baseline that we could start from. The 2017 training standard was set too high. We knew that, but then when we looked to lower it to a base, we couldn't really find a consistent base of practical skill that we could build up from. So therefore, we set towards making the foundation, and the arrows indicate that everything pointed towards developing the course, not just developing a training standard. So we talked about not consistency, the time they had to develop it, the size of the companies, and the growing amount of demand. And only the reports from PricewaterhouseCoopers and other leading organizations indicated that we needed to get on with this subject and on with it quick. So when we came to develop the materials, me as a project manager, I had quite a few problems. First of all, I didn't know what I didn't know. So the working group certainly helped with that. But all it really did was tell me that there was a lot more questions I didn't know the answer to. When we looked out in the industry, there was no comparison, into the drone training world. There was no comparison for what we wanted to deliver. There was not many qualifications in the UK have got equivalents in different organizations, but we couldn't find a comparator. And then that standard of flying and assessment, there was no guarantee that someone could fly. We were reliant totally on the GBC and on individual training providers telling us that their pilots could fly without any comparator between one company or another. And so the levels of capability meant that we really had to look at addressing right down to the lowest level, not taking in the GVC, putting that to one side and developing something separate. So the initial working group started off with people from industry, as well as people who are drone training providers, such as Heligai, Elliott, who's with us, BSA, and Sellafield, and so on and so forth. So we had a mixture. The group, by the way, is much bigger than that now. So this is how the timeline of the process went through. So we did the review, and in January 2021, we established a working group and set up the rules, basically. That's what happened in 2021 and started. And the biggest stumbling block we came across was, how are we going to test that we can then get tested all the way across the country, that any training provider can use, any RAE, in other words. And we solved that problem and then moved on to the next one. So we looked at the outcome of the review, and then that became, well, we've got to develop the materials. And so by the end of September 2021, we put out a tender to develop materials. However, understanding how limited knowledge we had, we then needed a consultant to check the materials that were being developed by the drone community. And then in 2021, we created the tender, we put it out, reviewed the applications, and then really we got started in March 2022, when because obviously in December you don't get much time. January is a bit of a slow month, so it was March before we actually got on with it. By April 2022, we'd awarded the contract, we kicked off the meeting, and then we started reviewing the materials with the consultant. And that process we went through of reviewing and feedback until we got to the point where we wanted. And some other issues started to emerge out of that. So the ECI context was the biggest issue. We found that a lot of individuals knew a great deal about drones, about flying drones, about the legal operating, about planning flights and so on, but then they couldn't apply it into our context. There was very little knowledge there. So then we finished the materials, we helped develop the ECI context, and then we put it through the PCAS, by the way, is acronyms, as Eleanor said, is a provider course assessment scheme. So we put it through our own rules. If someone applies to ECITB to put a course together, it goes through a PCAS. We go through exactly the same, even though we've developed it ourselves. And then we found that we didn't have any training providers, any RAEs who could offer it. So we then had to work on that. And if you have seen any of the ECITB marketing and publicity over the previous year, you'll have seen it was all about getting RAEs to join us, and that problem has now been resolved. And when we went in for the first test, we needed someone who had not been involved in developing the material, much to Elliott's consternation. And so we had to get somebody who had not been involved to check the product was deliverable by someone impartial, which is what we did. And then we took a full range of individuals to test it, from someone who had never flown a drone at all to passing the first test or experienced. And so we'd set the standard. So then we had to test it. So we set a pilot up, and that pilot took place at Neath Port Talbot. And some of the images there show you, obviously the training going on and the rig set up for testing, and some of the modules and some of the content. But I'd like to bring your attention to the little rectangles in the bottom on the left-hand side of the screen. And that was really, we were interested in the red box. What we found is that most of the people who came from the drone fraternity were very clear on the light blue box on the outside. But then as it got closer to the red box, the knowledge was less and less, which is what the point was making on the other slide. Next one, Elliott, please. And so we have this meeting of two worlds, and this is a slide actually from the foundation. Do you want to take over from here, Elliott, or shall I continue?
No, yeah, I'll take over. Basically, one of the biggest issues we had throughout is that, I came into this, it's 2020, 21, 22. I've been operating for 10 years, and actually it was a massive steep learning curve for me as well, because we won the tender to write the course. I wrote the foundation course, but some of the methodologies of working within the industrial sector were very, very new to me, and I figured, there are those of us who are very experienced operators, very good at operating drones, did not know some of the basics of operating on these very, very complex sites. And Kevin Westwood, who was working with us, very kindly gave me what I came to call his little book of death, which is basically quite a horrible little book about, the nasty accidents that happen on these kind of sites when people don't work properly. So what we needed to try and do through the course was to join these two worlds together. So the idea of the foundation course is that, as well as doing some of the bits that we do on the GVC and the more general drone operation things and techniques and so on, and with a heavy focus on practical as well, it also begins to bring in those those skills you need to just be able to even just to get onto some of these sites. For example, when you're working on a nuclear site or something like that, and also to begin to understand how your jobs might impact the whole site. So the fact that you've got your little UAS job going, you know, when you're working somewhere the size of Sellafield, which is the size of a small town, you know, the other bits and bobs you've got going on at the same time, and how your drone operation could impact that if it started to go wrong. So there was you know, when we write, it was a really good learning curve for me, and having delivered the course a couple of times to people who, some people who've never done drones before, and others who have come from the drone side of things. You know, everyone I think had something to learn. So we were really pleased with it, with how the pilot course went that we carried out. We had people from Sellafield Network Rail who were more experienced pilots, and then we had people from Newport Talbot College who'd never flown a drone in their life. So it was quite interesting bringing those two groups together. And at the end of that process, at the end of that kind of 6-9 month process, we have a course that I think hangs together really well. So we're pleased with that, and it is, you know, in some ways still quite, you know, it's a sensible entry level course. That's why it's the foundation. But it does help. I think, yeah, lots of people have lots to learn from it. Okay, and we had that one, which is just the, you know, the little rig we set up to test those slightly more difficult skills of getting in and around things. Again, still at this kind of foundation level. Anything else you want to add there, Rich, or do you want to?
I'd particularly like this slide because there are 3 images that's there. The one on the left-hand side is almost the representation of the geographical area that most people know quite well, flying at 400 feet and looking down onto what is essentially just a football pitch. And then the next view represents that we're on site and we're looking at the asset, or in the area that we need to be, the area of focus. And then the far image on the far right then indicates the kind of information that we're going to need from the drone operator and what is acceptable. And one of the most pleasing things for me when we did the course and finally did the pilot was the level of information that they were recovering. We put strict guidelines about how far they flew away from the object and how they operated as they flew. And it was very interesting to see such a wide variety of flying styles. I didn't think there would be some, you know, just for flying a drone out to go look at, but it was very obvious that some people are extremely confident and comfortable and approached it almost quite aggressively, and other people approached it extremely gingerly. Some of them were very safety cautious and so on. So the course was very good at showing. It very quickly showed whether someone who had many hours underneath the belt and those that had really not flown at all, which you would expect, but it was very highlighted. And the test proved, you know, to be quite a good barometer of people's skills. And although I would imagine that most of the people, if not all the people attending this session, would be easily comfortable in providing that information, some of the topics, including the photogrammetry and the clarity of images, was very interesting for somebody who was getting it, who was new compared to someone who had experience. So it really was a good barometer.
Yeah, and just to finish up on this bit, is the foundation course consists of foundation modules, 5 foundation modules, which are then assessed theoretically with an exam. There's then a theory bit in terms of creating the risk assessment and work pack. So it goes beyond the basic risk assessment of the GVC into kind of an industrial work pack. We're then assessing the practical skills, but we're also assessing the quality of the data as well, not just the flying, and the ability of the candidate to get the data to the examiner in a sensible way, and an appreciation of various other elements as well. So there's a lot going on. It's not just the kind of flying test at the end of it. And so it's good. As we then following on from that, we then applied for the future flight, closing the skills gap that came up last year, 2023. And we successfully got that in collaboration with the ECITB. And what that allowed us to do was to spend some time effectively writing some modular advanced skills tests. And these are much more aimed around specific tasks, because again, something that came back out of the stakeholder group was that although they could, although they could assess people to a degree, it was taking a lot of time, and they wanted some way of just saying this person is capable of doing this particular skill. And whether that's flying in confined spaces, whether that's surveying or doing basic inspection flying, or what we're calling exploratory flying, where you're going into an unknown environment, that kind of thing, which happens a lot on some of these tests. So as a result, we ended up writing these 7 advanced skills tests with the idea to provide a benchmark again for stakeholders looking to contract or employ remote pilots and to reduce inconsistencies. So all of this, again, came from stakeholder input from what the industry wanted, which then led to the development of the tests. We tested them internally during last year and then put them for external review with some of the stakeholders and closed out that project in November. I'm not going to spend too long on this because I want, we want to allow people to ask questions if they want to, and so on. So I'll just whip through some of the challenges. Part of the challenge in the process is quantification of soft skills. It's very easy for me when I'm assessing people's flying to go, yes, I think that person's good. But how do you then, if I'm saying somebody's good and then another ATP is carrying out the same test, is our level of good the same? So quantifying that was really quite difficult. And trying to ensure consistency between the approved training providers, and anybody needs to be able to pick this up and replicate it once they've been approved by the ECITB to deliver the training and assessment. So the idea was to try and create a scenario that could be replicated by any ATP and didn't break the bank in terms of having to create structures, which was part of the problem with the original 2017 model, is that one of the requirements was like a 3-meter tower, permanently set up and things like that, which, a lot of people wouldn't have. So we tried to make it accessible as well, and also platform agnostic. And again, the focus was around the core skills of operational planning, remote piloting, and data acquisition and processing. In terms of the quantification, that bit took probably most of, the first part of the project was about how do we quantify. And we came up effectively with a system of spider diagrams with different skills on it. Now, these to some degree are a work in, not necessarily still a work in progress, but they're in constant development because of just finessing them through doing the various testing we've done over the 6 months of the Future Flight project. And the first thing I was asked to do was to actually quantify the GVC in terms of operational skills and flight skills. So what you end up with is 7 operational skills on the left, including data planning, risk assessment, communications, etc. And then on the right is the kind of sum of the flight skills that we're trying to assess. So things like close proximity flight, flying without GPS, etc. And the GVC came out roughly like that. And I'll be honest, I've been quite generous, otherwise it might have just ended up a dot. I wanted a little bit of a shape to show people. So, that's how the GVC came out as the kind of, what had previously been the industry baseline. And this next one, when I had the red line, this is the simplest of the skills tests, which is basically a close inspection skills test. And you can see immediately the kind of requirements and are increasing in terms of both the operational skills and the flight skills. So that ASTO1 is just a close inspection flight test. And then AST02, that shouldn't be 02, I've labeled it wrong. That should be 07, actually not 02. That was just me having a glitch in my mind yesterday. So the purple one is actually the enclosed space beyond visual line of sight investigative flight operations, which is something we were asked for where somebody's going into an unknown environment for whatever reason. And again, the planning skills are the same or slightly higher, and the operational skills as you get into sort of confined space, low light, beyond visual line of sight environments becomes higher. Okay, so that's the way we quantify it. And we have this drawn out for the assessor, and the assessor can kind of mark people, and there's a system for the grading and how you do that, which I'm not going to get into now. But basically, it works very, very well, and it does take away some of that kind of qualitative nature of assessment that has it. that you get whenever you do a test of any kind. And these are the 7 tests we ended up with for the moment. Some of them may go by the wayside, some of them may become very popular, but we've got enclosed inspection, enclosed space, surveys by fixed wing and multi-rotor. I was asked to split those out. Contact flight, so actually deliberately putting the drone into contact with surfaces for various reasons. Close range BVLOS combined with below the remote pilot, because in a lot of the industrial environments you do end up working below yourself, which is quite unusual if you haven't done that before. And then finally the enclosed space beyond visual line of sight. And as we were getting towards the end of the project, we started to hear about the way that the CAA were proposing for new certifications. You know, you've probably all heard about by now the kind of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 proposal. If you haven't, then it's in the current CAA consultation. Have a look at it. And pretty much all of the tests we've written so far will be under level 1 or level 2. And it gave me a good opportunity towards the end of the project to start to effectively level them out and see if we can begin to tie those in with where the CAA are going with their ideas in terms of requirements for flight training and so on. And so I basically leveled the tests, level 1 and level 2, where level 1 level 1 as far as the CAA concerned are visual flights with visual threat management, as we've always done under a kind of PDRA1 type scenario. Level 2 is beginning to look at that kind of idea of atypical airspace, whether that's visual or beyond visual line of sight, where you're not expected to deconflict tactically from other aircraft, which does sort of lend itself nicely to beginning in certain environments to looking at sort of longer range infrastructure inspection, close range with limited visibility, that kind of thing. And so yeah, we've ended up with these 7 tests that we believe genuinely challenge remote pilots to have good skills and get useful data in complex environments. And the aim, as far as the stakeholders are concerned, is that if you've done these tests, you can go, I've got test 1, 3, 7, whatever, then you can give that to the stakeholders, and if they're looking to employ pilots or contract pilots, and it just will streamline that process and get you on site quicker. It's hopefully fairly future-proof because it will, you know, we can adapt these, you know, on demand really to see which ones are needed moving forwards and which ones might not be needed or might change with the changing demands of the industry. And you know, just a few photos of some of the bits and bobs. Cheap and cheerful. We kept it as cheap and cheerful as possible so that as we can get as many ATPs on board as possible to run it for the ECITB. And then the next step beyond this is the advanced course. There is going to be an advanced course that's out to tender at the moment, and it's going to be a case of watch this space. And the idea of the advanced one again is that they wanted. I think the stakeholders really want people with deeper skills that can move on drone operations beyond where they are at the moment. And the idea of the advanced course is to, you know, have a deeper syllabus and to look at the future of drone operations. So it's got a greater depth syllabus associated with it, greater depth training standard than the foundation course. And if you want, there's loads more information about the courses and what they entail on the ECITB website and also on our website and the other ATP's websites as well that are currently approved. It'd be interesting to find out, you know, if people are interested in attending. There may be funding available particularly if you're on one of the, you know, you're working for one of the levy-paying ECITB companies. There's also funding available for the Welsh Government as well for a personal learning account. You know, some of the courses are funded through that. And so there's a list of providers and information on our website and the ECITB website. That kind of is a whistle-stop tour. I'm aware I haven't gone into much depth on the actual courses, but as I say, you can find that information online anyway. And our contact details, if you wanted to talk to myself or Reg, I missed that one, are here. So just elliott.corke@globaldronetraining.com and reg.rudd@ecitb.org.uk. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Reg, before?
Just the ECITB is not stopping at the foundation was only really to get us to the right level to do what we'd originally started in 2017. the advanced course is really the repackaged 2017. I don't mean repackaged as in it's, you know, it's the same thing. It's not. It's going to be an entire course, which is why the tender is out now. We're going to write a full course with all the materials. So any RAE who becomes a provider can deliver it, and they will get all of the pack of materials to deliver. The only DIY skills are to put the rigs together, and the advanced is definitely a big step up from the foundation. The amount of knowledge that is required to move to the next level is quite considerable. That is not the final course. It's only along the journey. We still have got another course that's under development, or as in the syllabus is under development. And then in 2025, we'll be developing the next level. So we're going to be here for a long time, and we're doing it to help our industry adopt drones wholesale. So increase the amount of work, the amount of drone pilots, and obviously the amount of savings that they can make by using drones.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both Elliott and Reg. That's a very good, as you say, whistle-stop tour of how you're going about this at the moment, how you've gone about it to date. As you say, it is going to be vital that we build the set of certifications and qualifications for people in this industry to give other industries the confidence to adopt drones safely and be able to accept that those flying them are doing so in a professional manner and suitable to the industry that they're working in. So this is a great step in the right direction. So we've reached the Q&A section of today's webinar. We have a number to go through already.
Yeah.
Please do ask questions. This is absolutely your time to find out more and ask those questions that are definitely burning your mind and you've been itching to ask. So we will start. The first is training of remote pilots is important, but also the assurance of the companies/operators providing the remote pilots to industry. Is there an assurance process and a list of requirements to assess against? Are there standards? The CAA UK addresses the regulatory requirements, but what about the SMS to support safe flying activities, communications, abnormal and emergency operations, and crew communication? Sorry, apologies for that. And I'm going to hand that over. It's probably going to be a mixture of both of you answering that.
Do you want to pick up on it at all, Reg? Or
yeah, that's the plan. You've just hit exactly what we're doing. We're actually developing a set of standards that any pilot can be measured against. We're trying to make sure that they have the knowledge to be able to complete the assessments and the practical tests. There is communication built into it, but I did hear from what Eleanor said there, there's part of that is picked up in the advanced, but all of it is picked up between the two of them. The certification, as you obviously go from the foundation to the advanced is far, far above the foundation in flying skills, and the tests are above the advanced. So I did go and attend the trial day for the AST1, and we had 3 good pilots there. For an example, 2 of them achieved the test, even though they're all good pilots. 1 of them did not. And that to me was, I came away very, very pleased, because it's not, the idea is not everybody's a winner. You know, that if you can do it, you can do it. And if you can't, you can't. And that's the level that we set the tests at. I'll shut up now, Elliott.
yeah, I was just going to say, and in terms of the modules, on that one, the one of the modules is the kind of there's kind of planning and processes and so on, and it's yeah, our focus when we've been flying, excuse me, previously, has always been, you know, on the just the flying of the drone, as you say, the CIA regulatory stuff. And the whole, pretty much the whole of the last module is bringing that into the ECI context, the safety management systems that exist in the various environments, being aware of, you know, business as usual procedures, emergency procedures, and so on the site, as well as your own stuff. So yeah, it is about tying it in with everything that's going on these industrial sites, as well as the general kind of the procedures that we have to carry out legally as drone operators. Yeah.
That's great. The next question, where does the CSCS green card fit into this process? Will an ECITB qualification cover this aspect, or is there any overlap at all?
To be perfectly honest, I don't even know what a CSCS green card is, and therefore I couldn't comment on the lap. But I'm willing to go and have a look and come back to whoever's asked the question and see where it does. But I don't know. When we're obviously a different organisation, and I'll have a look at what that means. I mean, ultimately, even though we talk about ECI, it is really, take away the ECI, it's about industrial flight. It's about flying on industrial sites and abiding with the safety management system, as Elliott said. The rules behind every safety management system are very similar. So I can't imagine it'd be far away, is an abbreviated answer, but I will go and have a look at where it fits in with the green CSCS card and come back to the person who's asked that question. I've not had that before.
Thank you. Are you getting prepared ahead of the CAA UK issuing new guidance on the remote piloting and command competencies in the specific category?
It wasn't kind of deliberate, but that's where it's kind of ended up, because obviously as a trainer, I've been keeping a close eye on what's been going on, and we're on several working groups with the CAA and ARPAS-UK to discuss all of that. And when we first got involved in 2021, 22, it was completely separate, and we didn't know that the CAA were going down the route they're going to go down. So we ended up developing this quite practical course. And then, of course, over the last 6 months or so, when that first consultation came out on the pilot competence, which hinted that they wanted a bigger focus on the practical skills, that all started to tie into it nicely. And then as we went through the first consultation into the second consultation, and the leveled system started to develop, that's it naturally in my head went, right, well, let's make this useful. If they're going to require flight, contact hours and flight time, let's make that flight time useful and see if it will tie in with what we're trying to achieve. Now, I haven't spoken to the CAA about that yet, but it's something that would be really interesting to speak with them about, because it could tie in and kill two birds with one stone. That's always good. So yes, so it wasn't intentional, but it kind of came out that way.
I personally have raised it with the CAA. I have spoken to them about it, and they were going away to discuss it. I haven't had a response, but I have pointed out that it does. And I think that was after discussions with Elliott, but I did raise it with the CAA the last time I saw them.
When you say beyond visual line of sight, are you referring to extended VLOS operations or confined spaces? Not BVLOS operations in manned airspace, long range, etc.
Okay. When we say BVLOS on this one, with respect to the advanced skills test, they are primarily either BVLOS because it's inside like some kind of structure and you're flying it in to investigate something and can't see it, or you're doing mainly close range inspection where you might end up temporarily behind a structure, that kind of thing. So it's what I would call close range beyond visual line of sight. Extended visual line of sight doesn't exist anymore. We're not allowed to, well, we're told not to use that term specifically in training. So it's either VLOS or it's beyond visual line of sight, but beyond visual line of sight with visual mitigation is what we would now call extended visual line of sight. But the atypical level 2 stuff does begin to cover longer range flights where there is a mitigation against incursion by other aircraft. So, for example, a close linear inspection on electricity infrastructure, for example, may fall into that level 2 area. But primarily for the purposes of this, it was what our industrial stakeholders wanted, which was what I would call close range beyond visual line of sight, where there's no risk, particularly of it ending up where other aircraft are.
a message. Next one comes up. I obviously have a vested interest in the operational planning aspect of the course. What approaches are taught in this module? Specifically, do you advocate a manual approach of visiting multiple websites, data sources for risk assessment and filling in spreadsheet logs and document templates? Or do you plan to move things forward and recommend adoption of standardized systems which aggregate data and provide reliable and robust operations management for pilots to adopt from the outset of their piloting careers?
We, hi Dorian, we basically don't push any particular system. Okay, the issue we do have with a lot of the industrial stakeholders is that they have very, very fixed systems in terms of creating work packs to work in those environments and so on, which probably you'd want to have ongoing conversations with them about. We don't push any particular system. We make people aware, as always, that there are manual ways of doing things, more automated ways of doing things, ways to streamline things. So yeah, but we, as far as I was concerned when I was writing the course, I was told to make it as agnostic as possible to the different drone systems and to the different kind of ways of preparing for an operation. Happy to talk to you about it more, Dorian, if you want at some point.
When we did develop it from our perspective, we wanted them to clearly understand the risk assessment process with regards to working on site, and the best skill they can have is to fully understand how a risk assessment works and how they are going to mitigate any risks. The automated systems are great, but they pre-populate a lot, and there can be an over-reliance on the systems. So we deliberately pared back on systems and looked more at, can you drive it with a pen, basically, the basic risk assessment, understand the methodology behind a risk assessment creation and the analysis of the hazards. And then, whatever system you feed it into is fine, but you must have them skills to be able to conduct it. We specifically didn't want the analysis to be done by a subset of data when really, it's such a fluid environment and things are changing all the time that it is very difficult, especially on an ECI site that's probably got 100 different activities happening in the same area, and yours would be just one. So we did drive deliberately down, but that doesn't mean that in the future we couldn't look at, how these systems affect the planning side of it. And we could always discuss that with the development of the next phase. But in the foundation course, we deliberately steered away from that type of approach because we think that, as Elliott said, a lot of the sites have their own system. And even if you plump for one system for one site, it'd be a totally different system on another site, depending on who they favour themselves or which international company they work for.
Indeed. Question here. I missed the first few minutes of the webinar, so this may have been answered. To what extent have the CAA been involved in the project?
I'll start and then I'll have to hand over to Elliott. The CAA, we invited them right at the very beginning. We explained to them what we were doing. And due to most of the work being close inspection on industrial sites, they were happy for us to progress. They've had a watching brief and they still have a watching brief. But other than, the odd conversation with them, they have left us to get on with it. The recent conversation was less than a couple of months ago, and they still have got a watching brief, but haven't. And I've directly engaged with them to say, from your and recent research, as I just said earlier on, that these things are crossing over, and they kind of agreed and then went off into a huddle to discuss, but I haven't had any results.
I have nothing to add to that one.
Nothing to add. Right.
Next question then. Can you please explain what a one-stick recovery is?
No, unless you tell me who you are. A one-stick recovery is getting your aircraft back just using effectively, if you're on mode 2, your right stick. It's a way of reorientating and recovering the aircraft very quickly and efficiently from any distance, as long as you can see the aircraft, even as a dot, although I know we're not supposed to do that.
How long will the qualification last, and will it be recognised across the construction industry?
Reg.
So the qualification has a 3-year life cycle per test, which is the standard for competency recognition within our industry. Is it recognised across the entire industry right now? No. Will it be? The answer is yes. I think what we are in is we're in the early stages. We've been asked to solve this problem by industry. It's not the ECITB does not financially benefit from doing this at all. That's not what we're here. We're here because we are given a mandate by the government to set standards. We've been asked to set standards in this area for the very reasons that we've outlined. And a lot of that is because they deliberately want us to adopt the technology wholesale. But our clients are pushing back and saying, basically, we don't know who to use. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know how it's going to affect our insurances. We don't even know the questions, all the things we've discussed. So the answer is no, it isn't yet, because it isn't widely adopted as a technology yet. As it goes through, it's already recognised on the sites we're working with, and they're already asking for tests out the Elliott for with regards to this. So it is a developing scenario. Our ambition is not to take over the world or to make loads of money or to ensure everybody does ECITB qualifications. Our driver is to make them safe on the sites, and that will have a spill-off effect on everybody else.
Would you say that some of your training courses would also fit the needs of other industries? In which case, can they be promoted via their trade bodies too?
I mean, from our perspective, the skills that the skills tests that we've been developing already, we've already had some questions about those from other sectors, particularly things like emergency services for internal inspection work or internal rescue work, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, again, whether that can be recognised in the same way, because ECITB obviously has a focus on their particular sectors. I don't know, but obviously, the things we've learned about the way that we test pilots could easily be moved around into other sectors. Particularly the easier ones like the close inspection fits in all kinds of different things. So yeah.
Great.
The answer for me is absolutely. We don't want it to be a limitation to they're just paying the bill, basically, the ECI.
It's just an observation rather than a question here from someone. In 10 years of drone flying, he has only been asked for a CSCS card twice. I'm afraid many treat it as a tick box, and a site-specific risk assessment and induction does a far better job.
That's mine.
There you go.
That's why Nipson lives in that drawer.
I think that's because the person's a construction person. It's not an engineering construction person. The CSCS wouldn't really.
Yeah, I got a bit confused with that at the early stages. Well, again, the steep learning, the learning curve about what the industry, the ECI bit was actually quite huge for me, and the kind of environment. So actually going to visit the various sites, going to see Sellafield and so on, you appreciate why it's there.
So it's not a CSCS card, that's all. It wouldn't be applied on our sites.
Yeah.
The RPC competency levels in the CAA's consultation really focuses on air risk, ARC A to D. Could your courses help consider scaling on ground risk as well, typically closer to assets or people?
We do. I mean, we talk about, obviously in the courses, foundation course particularly, we do talk about air risk and ground risk. We haven't the foundation course was written before we had a lot of the information on SORA, etc., that we, that we're going to need to do some adaptation to that over the next year, 2 years, as that all phases in. One interesting thing I found about the ECI sites is actually the ground risk in itself is actually generally quite low, because they're incredibly controlled sites. So the biggest risks tend to be that you're putting the drones a lot closer to the infrastructure than you normally would be. And then, but the sites themselves are much more sterile than most of the general sites that we work in when we're doing more general drone jobs. So, I mean, certainly we try and get them to consider all the elements of risk, and we will be, obviously, as SORA comes in, there'll be some adaptation work to do on the content of the course to make sure that it all stays aligned.
Right.
I don't know if that actually answers the question, but that's my thought on it.
I think it does. Is there an ambition to push this beyond industrial sites and further into built environment market / workplace places?
The answer is they could adapt it as they wish. The concepts that's built into the foundation course is about good planning, good risk assessments, about knowing where you're flying and knowing your drone, and actually being aware of how it flies and how other environments, like, for example, shear winds or the metallic buildings affect the navigation systems, which most people will know, but it could easily adapt even at foundation level. Someone could easily adapt it at foundation level to apply to most built up environments. They're there, the GBC and whatever the rules that CAA apply would probably have more impact on that than the industrial side of it does.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see
uninvolved people.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where the CAA go with, after this current consultation, in terms of what they that required flight time for the different levels, what they're going to actually want to be done. There are certain bits in the consultation about the types of flying, but it doesn't really appear to be directed. And I'd like to see it far more applied. You can't beat applied flying, actually in the real environment, to actually improve your skills. So, yeah.
A very valid question coming up. When are these training courses / testing commencing?
The training courses are available now. Just speak to Elliott for the foundation and the foundation tests. The actual high-level testing will be available probably March. It's just going through the quality processes that ECITB requires to do, more to do with implementing our systems. We actually use an online system, and therefore all questioning is done online, so through multiple choice, through an electronic system. So it's in that conversion process from Elliott's longhand. Sorry, I didn't mean long-winded, Elliott. Sorry, cheers. Longhand into electronic, and it'll be available soon. The advanced is under development, as in the tender has gone out now, but that course is really training you to get to the level to be able to do the AST tests, and that should be available at the end of the year, beginning of next.
Yeah, so we ran a that, and I can pick up that next question as well in terms of pilots qualified to date. So we ran the pilot course back in 2022, and all the pilots who were on that course were, except one who didn't pass, they're officially qualified, aren't they, Reg? Those ones. So the pilot course, yes, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 6, and then we qualified another 4 since. So we've had a lot going on with the writing of the advanced skills test and things as well. We actually haven't pushed that hard on the courses yet. So we've qualified another, or certified another 4 following the pilot, and then the courses are live, so they are there, and it's an interesting one for us running the courses because they're quite different to what we've done in the past. And we're looking at ways that we can run it. It is quite it's quite intensive on instructor resources to run a course. So best will in the world. It's not that, you know, it's trying to keep it cost effective, but it is expensive to run it for effectively a week of training. So yeah, have a look around. If you've got any more questions, then give me a look. Yeah, there are some other providers as well. Other ATPs are available, but they're not here talking.
Will a list of those qualified individuals or companies be promulgated to members or be available anywhere?
When you say the qualified individuals or company, do you mean the ones to run the course or the ones that have been through?
That's a very good question. So in terms of those who are qualified to run the course, I think that's all up on the ECITB website.
Yep.
And at the moment, I think it's just the 2 ATPs, isn't it?
Yeah, there's 3 more that's about to be certified. They're just going through we're very strict anyway. Not everybody gets to do
Great.
it.
So checking out the ECITB website is it's the place to find those. What about the list of those who have qualified as individuals?
So what happens? Obviously we're going into the realms of GDPR here. And people's names and so on and so forth. So if someone turns up with a certificate, which is what I'm hoping the question is about, and you want to know whether the certificate's genuine and that they definitely did the course at the time that it did, then you contact the ECITB, give them the certificate details, as in the name, the number, and so on, and then they will confirm whether it's a real certificate. There is a further verification process if you want to go further. So as in, you know, provide an image and we'll confirm. We just are not allowed through GDPR to hand out information that is, you know, and I'm sure some of the companies would be very reluctant to say, oh, yes, our pilot's just passed all this, and the other, and go, all right, well, we'll make him a job offer. So, yeah.
Well, funnily enough, that was going to be my question. I'm assuming that the qualification remains with the individual, because obviously that's who you're looking to train. Yes. And obviously, in due course, that will sort of affect their earnings potential, and hopefully encourage more companies to train their pilots to higher standards, because obviously that will then enable them to be able to work on such ECI sites as well. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. You've taken us through a very good sort of whistle-stop tour of how you're looking at all of this, and how we have been certainly, at least in the early stages, involved as well. We will continue to do so, and we'll look to see how the advanced courses come through. Maybe in a year's time we can do some more on that as well, and share that information out. Always delighted to help the professionalism of the industry, and if we can get that everyone doing them, all the better for everyone concerned.
Yeah.
I'm going to reiterate what Dorian has said and say thank you. You've made it easy, and if you make it easy, you're then more likely to do it. So thank you to both Elliott and Reg. If you have any further questions, you've got about 30 seconds in which to ask. And otherwise, let me know. Contact me, please, at membership@arpas.uk, and I am very happy to forward questions about this topic to both Elliott and Reg. And if not, we will say goodbye. Thank you, because we have run a little bit over time here, and I'm conscious that everyone has work in which they need to do as well. Thank you, everyone. The watch again link will be sent out to all those who have registered to attend, and it will be posted both to the ARPAS UK website as well as to YouTube. Please do share it out to colleagues and others in appropriate industries, to help improve our knowledge both of what drones can do and the qualifications that people need to get them to be able to do those things. In the meantime, please do check out also the ARPAS UK website for further webinars that are happening. Next week, we have Xenotech talking about, amongst other things, much more sort of future-facing side of things. So do please come along. All our previous webinars are also up on the website and can be watched again. Thank you very, very much, Elliott and Reg,
Thank you
for fascinating insight. And I am going to stop recording and say thank you.